Dear Sangha, today is the 1st of November in the year 2020, and we are in the Upper Hamlet in the Dharma Cloud Temple in the Stillwater Meditation Hall in our 3-month winter retreat, of which we have already practiced half. We're at the midpoint of our winter retreat, our autumn retreat, our 3-month retreat. So first of all, thank you very much to the Upper Hamlet. For being so welcoming. We're going to listen to 3 sounds of the bell and enjoy our breathing in and out. So, dear Sangha, in our Plum village practice, and maybe in other traditions too, we talk about meditation words. We use words to help our mindfulness and our concentration. So when we just practice just now, we use the words in and out. And meditation words are like seeds. They bring up, they touch a certain seed. So the word in, it touches the seed. And then the word out, which you say to yourself, it touches another seed. And sometimes the seed is empty. It doesn't have anything inside. And sometimes the seed is full and it has a sprout and a root. So the idea is that the seed sprouts when we say the word. And some people may ask, oh, is that auto-suggestion? If I say the word calm, ease. So we have to answer that question for them. When I say the word calm, does it mean I already feel calm? Or does it mean I tell myself, hey, you have to feel calm? So, if I say the word in and out to myself, that is just recognizing this is an in-breath, and it is to help me stay with my in-breath so that I don't think about anything else. Because sometimes we think in words, and if we say the word that we really want to put all our concentration on, we can just stay with that, in and out. And then after a while it's deep and slow. And your breath will be deeper, that is sure. It will be slower than when you just began. But whether it is at its deepest and at its slowest, it may not be. It's the same when you say to yourself, I have arrived, I am home, I am solid, I am free. You may be more solid than when you started. You may be more free, but it may not be the most solid and the most free yet. So sometimes we say, breathing in, my breath goes deeper, and breathing out, my breath goes slower. And then we say deep, slow. And we can experience everything, not just our breath, on a deeper level. And we can slow down everything, not just our breath, but our body and our mind can slow down also. So meditation words are to help us stay with what we want to stay with. And if they just become empty words, then they won't really help us very much. It's like a kind of feedback system, if you know about cybernetics. Huh? So you say the word, or you feel something and then you say the word, and it, what is it? It goes in, they feed each other. Huh? Yeah, the saying the word and the practice, they feed each other. And then you may find you don't need the word anymore. The word maybe help you to adjust a little bit if you start going off course. So then there's another use of words. I don't know whether we can call them meditation words, but recognition words. One time when one of my elder brothers was dying and not really conscious, we would hear him say from time to time the word fear. He just said, fear. And we knew that at that time he was recognizing in him the fear was coming up. Because even though he practiced very deeply, his practice was very solid, we all, deep in our consciousness, we had those fear. The Buddha also too had that fear. And when the causes and conditions are there, it will be watered and it will come up into mind consciousness. And so he was just recognizing there is fear. And that is a way to be able to embrace the fear. Just to be able to recognize and say the word fear. And then you're not carried away by the fear. And it will slowly go back. But then maybe 10 minutes later, it will come up again. And you will be able to take care of it. Fear. I recognize the fear. I don't try and push it away. But I recognize it's only fear. It's not more than fear. It's not less than fear. This is it. It's just fear. And the same is true for joy. When we feel the joy comes up in us naturally. Sometimes after a formal meal, I don't know why, you walk outside and you feel the joy of the practice. All the joy you had in the formal meal, and now you have the joy of walking on the earth, and that joy just comes up. And many of us have little moments of joy in the day, but they don't last so long. But if we can say the word joy, then we know it's there, we recognize it, and it will stay there for longer. So in the case of fear, it's very interesting. In the case of fear, when you say the word fear, your fear becomes less. And in the case of the word joy, if you say the word joy, the joy lasts longer. So that is our mindfulness, looking after our mind and looking after the seeds, our mind consciousness, looking after the seeds that need to be looked after, the seeds that need to be taken good care of, those of you who work in the happy farm, and the seeds that need to be composted. So, dear Sangha, can we look at the four noble truths? Suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of the cause of suffering, and the path that leads, or as Thai would say, the path that is the end of the cause of suffering. Because we usually say in Plum village that the path and the means and the end, they're not really two separate things. So it's just an expedient when you divide the third from the fourth noble truth. So the first question is, why do we call suffering a noble truth? Why should suffering be something noble? And the answer usually is, because it contains the end of suffering. Suffering, the noble truth of suffering helps us to practice the noble truth of happiness. And if the noble truth of suffering doesn't help us to practice the noble truth of happiness, we cannot call either of them noble truths anymore. They are in each other. And then there are two kinds of suffering. We can divide suffering into two. We can talk about collective suffering, and we can talk about individual suffering. That is the suffering we feel directly. It comes from our own mental formation or our own body, and the suffering we feel that comes from the world. It is in the world around us. In 2000, and I don't know what it was, in 2005 or 6, we were in Deer Park Monastery, and a lay friend there wanted to take us to Mexico to be in touch a little bit with the suffering, with some suffering. And just over the border from where Deer Park is near San Diego, and San Diego is very close to the border with Mexico. So it's not difficult, it doesn't take very long to get from Deer Park into Mexico. So we went across the border, and it's only about, in those days it didn't take long to get across the border. And it's a very short drive between the luxurious homes of USA, California, and the slum of the town is called Tijuana, Tijuana, something like that. Yeah. And it's quite a shock, really, when you arrive in the slum, where there's sewage in the pathways between the shanty houses, which are made out of cardboard boxes and old garage doors. And that kind of shock, it stays with you for a long time, and is something I can never forget. It brings tears to your eyes. No running water, no electricity. If you want electricity, you have to steal it from the electric lines that are nearby. And it's very dangerous because you have to connect with something and then you get a bit of electricity, but it's not very safe. And the complete unemployment. Oh, yeah, something you have to breathe very deeply. And then we met the Christian nuns who were working there, who were doing their best to relieve some of what suffering they could with medicine, shelter for women, and food. But those material things are not enough to transform the suffering. So I suppose the thing that for me make it not so much the hell realm was the fact that there was compassion. There was compassion, yeah. And the children can still smile, the children I saw. And this kind of material suffering, this kind of poverty, it also brings about despair in the mind of the people. And because of that, they take drugs, they use heroin. And because of that, they don't have money, then they have to go and steal. So it's a vicious cycle that goes on like that. And when we look deeply into, what is the cause of the suffering? We know that it lies on the other side of the border. It lies in our human mind, in our greed. So what happens is that a company comes and say, here in Mexico the labor is very cheap, so we can employ people, we don't have to pay them very much. And but then there's a recession, and the company doesn't need to stay anymore, so they pull out, and all the people they employed, they have no more income, so they have to go and they live in the slum. And then the police who work in the slums, they a little bit blame the people who are there, and they say they are lazy, they don't try and find work, and they're on drugs and so on. And so there is the way the policemen look, and the people are very afraid of the policemen. Every time they see a police car come in, they run away, and so on. And now there's all the problem of the deportees from the US. So anyway, we look at this kind of collective suffering, and then we look at our individual suffering. And when we look at our individual suffering in the light of the collective suffering, our individual suffering, it is not so important. So that is, it's in a way, it's good for us to be able to see that. But still, it doesn't mean that we don't take care of our individual suffering. And as we said in Tijuana, there are Christian nuns there who are doing their best to help the people in the slums who are aware of the suffering and are doing something about it. And then I asked myself, well, what am I doing? And I know that I have been trained in Plum Village to relieve the suffering by offering retreats. But I also know that there are times when we, Plum Village monks and nuns, we also relieve the suffering in material ways. Like, for instance, in Vietnam at the moment, where there's been terrible storms and flooding. Every day the program for the brothers and sisters in Hue is to go on a relief mission to help the victims of the storms and the floods. So that is what Brother Pháp Ứng, who happened to be in Vietnam, is doing along with other brothers and sisters every day in Hue. But usually, apart from when there's a disaster, our way of helping the world is to receive retreatants and help them to know how to take care of their individual suffering. And that is like a drop in the river of taking care of collective suffering. And those people who come here and they are social workers, and they are psychotherapists, they have a chance to recharge their batteries and learn Dharma doors that can help them in their social work and in their psychotherapy. So whenever we have those retreats in Plum Village, and I lead a Dharma sharing group, or I'm in a Dharma sharing group, or I give consultation, I always feel that you and I, that is with the retreatant, we are not two, because I am just sharing my practice of the Dharma doors, and you are like the ambassador or whatever, who can take that practice into situations out in the world as a psychotherapist or as a social worker. So that kind of interbeing between the between the monastic and the retreatant is something that is always very, very nourishing for us. And I think some of us may, as monastics, we may be suffering a little bit at this moment because we don't feel that we can do what we've been trained to do in 100% way. It was a great happiness to me when when I participated in my first online retreat, and that was called neuroscience retreat. I can't remember what it's called, and I didn't realize that I could also feel that kind of interbeing with the retreatants over the computer. But in fact I could, and it moved me deeply, especially in the Dharma sharing, when you see your Dharma sharing family on the screen, and they can you can share with them, and then they express their gratitude and their joy of having the retreat. That is a great joy for me. But when they start sharing with each other and they bond with each other, that is and they say after the retreat we will keep having sharings together, and they help each other. They support each other by their sharings. So on the online retreat, the Dharma sharing is very deep, and I never expected that before. So I'm very grateful for all the technology, which sometimes I'm not grateful for, but now I feel gratitude for that. And I see that as human beings we can use technology to develop our understanding and compassion. And so normally when we look into the second noble truth, the origin, the cause of ill-being, we see that it comes from our human mind. Mostly it comes from our mental formation. If we think about the destruction of our natural environment, we see that comes from our greed and above all from our ignorance. So we know that we really need the path of practice in order to be able to transform our greed and our ignorance. And we don't feel that it's just people out there who have these mental formations and are therefore destroying the environment. But those mental formations are also in us. In myself I also have violence, aggression, the desire to hurt somebody who hurts me. All those seeds are there. The only thing is that living in the monastery and having a practice, and living outside the monastery and having a practice is the same. I can take care of those seeds. So now when we don't have the opportunity to have whole retreats in Plum Village, we have to live with each other as sisters and as brothers. And still I sometimes see that these seeds unwholesome seeds in me are watered. The way I look at somebody, there's not enough understanding in that. Not enough compassion in that. The way I think about someone may lack understanding and compassion. But thanks to the fact that I have my mindful breathing, my walking, to keep me aware of my mental formations, I'm able to see what's happening in my mind, and I'm able to correct my course, go back, bring myself back to more understanding and more compassion. So just because we aren't able to lead retreats doesn't mean to say that we don't have something to practice with. So now if let's take the third noble truth and the fourth noble truth as one instead of dividing them. So let's say that the path is the happiness. Every step on the path is the happiness, is the end of suffering. Sariputra gave a Dharma talk to the monks about right view. And right view is the first of the, usually we talk about as the first, but really we should see more like a circle. They all interact. So right view is the name of the sutra, Samadhi, Majjhima Nikaya, không có ai dịch nữa, có chứ, không biết có dịch nữa, không sao. Majjhima Nikaya number 9. And you know another sutra where the elder monk Kaccayana comes to the Buddha and says, right view, right view. What is right view? But these are younger monks, and they come to Sariputra, they say, right view, what is right view? And then Sariputra gives an answer. It's not the same as the Buddha's answer. Sariputra says, right view is to understand the roots of the wholesome and the unwholesome. kushala and akushala, wholesome and unwholesome. And the Sariputra says that we can understand the wholesome and the unwholesome in terms of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Protecting life, not taking what is not given, no sexual misconduct, and right speech, and right consumption. Those 4 things tell us about the wholesome and the unwholesome. And here we have the word understand. So we have to realize that it's just not making a chart which you had the black on one side and the white on the other side. In our practice of the 5 mindfulness trainings, in our practice of ethics, we have something is called understanding. And that is why in our mindfulness trainings we have aware of the suffering that is caused by. And that is where the understanding comes in. It is the awareness of the suffering. It's not just saying, this is wholesome, this is unwholesome, and you put things on one side and the other side. But you see that, yes, this brings about suffering. You understand, oh, this brings about suffering. And so you are determined not to do that thing. So, if you think about it, in Islam, in Christianity, in Hinduism, and the 5 mindfulness trainings probably began before the time of the Buddha. All these spiritual paths that we can think of, they all have these same principles of not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not lying, and not consuming drugs and alcohol that destroy our mind and our body. So that is a real encouragement for us that we can practice ethics as a human family. And protection of the environment is also something that all of the faiths they want to do. And the other day, a commitment to ending nuclear weapons is also something that all faiths support. So there are things we have in common as far as wholesome and unwholesome is concerned. But it's important always to be aware of the suffering cause. Because if not, we become dogmatic and we become caught in what is right and what is wrong. And we don't take every case according to that case, because there are some cases when maybe we might look, we're not keeping the 5 mindfulness trainings, but in fact because of our awareness of the suffering, we are doing something to alleviate the suffering of the world. Like sometimes It may be necessary to help someone end their life in order for them not to suffer so much. But normally, of course, we would never do that here. So awareness, the understanding is very important. And the second thing that and then after they say that monks is Dharma talk is the monks say, oh, this Dharma talk is too short. Yeah, I don't know. Please give us some more Dharma talk. So please tell us more. So can you say more about what is right view? And Sariputra say, understand again. So understanding the four nutriments is to understand the origin, usually the cause of the suffering, and also the cause of our happiness. Because the four foods can nourish our happiness. They don't just nourish our suffering. So we need to understand what is it that nourishes our happiness in our daily practice. What is it that nourishes our suffering? And that is what will help us. That is a kind of right view. It's the view that our happiness and our suffering, they have a cause. And if we understand that cause, we can either stop or we can increase it. The other day I couldn't sleep, but sometimes when you can't sleep, you get into a kind of half sleep mode. I don't know what that is called. You're not really awake, but you're not really asleep. And when I was in that half sleep, many beautiful images from the Institute of Applied Buddhism, they came up in my consciousness. Sometimes when I think about the EIAB, I think, it was a little bit difficult over there sometimes. But I didn't realize that in my store consciousness, there were so many beautiful images from the EIAB. And so even I couldn't sleep, I felt very nourished when these images came up. And I recognized that one of the functions people say about dreaming and sleeping is the time when our long-term memory, when things get laid down in our long-term memory. So I thought, so these images, they want to get laid down in my long-term memory, so that they're coming up. So we need to, we can put things into our long-term memory, and we do it all the time without knowing that we're doing it. So there must have been times in the autumn, especially in Germany, when the leaves were so beautiful. I felt like those golden leaves, a little bit like the Pure Land. And the air was so good. I forget about that sometimes, but the air in EIAB is very, very good. It comes from the nearby forest, I think. So I feel that air again as I lay there. And I recognize that I must have been very aware of those things in order for them to have made a deep. I must have been aware of my happiness at that time. So then we can think about what Tai once said. When we need to have a warm fire in the winter, in the autumn we will need to go out and bring in the wood and saw up the wood and store it to make the fire in the winter. And that is what we can do in our practice. Even if in the past we feel we didn't have much happiness to be stored up in our long-term memory, in the present, right away, we can begin to have that happiness which we can store up by being aware of the beauty around us, being aware of the wonder of life. So this is a way to understanding the Four Nutriments is a way to make our store consciousness, our long-term memory, be one that is more positive. And that can help us, when we have that, it can help to transform the suffering. One time when I was in the University of Heidelberg, talking to some students about animal rights, the Buddhist view of animal rights. I mentioned the neuroscience. I mentioned Humberto. What's he called? Varela, Francisco Varela. And one of the students was quite surprised and said, "Oh, I thought that spiritual people, they didn't like neuroscience too much. Because sometimes in the Christian church, they think that neuroscience just tries to prove that God is come from your mind. God doesn't have a reality outside of you." But I said that the wonder of the world is in fact increased by my understanding more how my mind works and how God is part of my mind and not outside of my mind. When I was in Plum Village in 2007, Thai said, "Oh, a long time you didn't write a song, so why don't you write a song?" And so I wrote a song, but I don't know. Which that time, it was this time of year, and sitting on Thai's, outside Thai's hut. The mind is painting a picture of sunshine and showers. The mind is painting a picture of days and hours. The mind is painting. The mind is enjoying. The mind is painting a picture of laughing and crying. The mind is painting a picture of living and dying. And it goes on and on like that. I don't think I will bore you with any more. But that is also, it is based on an insight from the from the Avatamsaka Sutra, which says that the mind is a skilled painter. Yeah. So, nang hua, able to paint all the world, all the worlds. The 5 skandhas come from there. And there is no phenomena which the mind doesn't create. And so if an ordinary person out in the world hears that, they may think, oh, then the world isn't so wonderful after all. It's just a creation of our mind. But to me, when I read that, when Thai taught that a long time ago, from the Avatamsaka Sutra, it showed me how wonderful the world is. And I was much more appreciative of the wonders of the world, knowing that it comes from my mind, or mostly from nearly all from my mind. So that is something that nourishes my happiness, is to be in touch with the wonder of life. And we recognize the first noble truth. There is suffering. But that doesn't mean to say that life isn't wonderful. That life isn't something we cannot stand in awe of, and we can enjoy very deeply. So there's also the other side of the food, and in the past I have had periods of episodic depression, and it's been very helpful to be able to look into the food in order to be able to transform that so that it doesn't last too long. So whenever I feel some kind of depression coming up, then I need to ask myself, what is it? What is the food that is nourishing this mental formation? And I know that much of that food comes from my own perception of myself and my perception of the world. But I also know that it needs something to trigger that perception I have of myself. So I need to ask, what is it that it triggered this time? And what did it trigger? And often it's the idea that I'm not worthy, that I don't have anything to contribute. Before that I thought, oh, I'm helping this and I'm helping that. And then somebody triggers something in me which say, oh, you don't have anything you can contribute. And immediately that feeling of depression is start to come up. And but then I recognize, it's those words. And those words, I understood them as saying, you don't have anything to contribute. But maybe that's a misunderstanding. Maybe that wasn't what was being said, but I understood it like that. So then I tell myself, oh, you have to come to that person and you have to ask them, is that what you really meant? But then something in me says, oh, but what if that person says it again? And then the depression will come up again. So then I feel a little bit afraid of going to that person. So I'd say to myself, I will give you a week to see what happens. And before going to the other person, because I think I need a week to make myself strong enough, and then I will go to the other person. So I give myself a week, and during that time, one thing that I learned from one of our retreatants, who wrote a letter to Thai, and say, every time I have a depression, I give my depression a bath. I take a shower. I give my depression a shower. So I thought one time I'll try that too. It really worked. I don't know why, but maybe just the pleasant bodily feeling, it helps. But it's not quite enough. You also have to look at your mind. And when I understand that I have this tendency to perceive myself as someone who's not worthy, who's not contributing anything, and just a few words from someone else, they can trigger that, then I can take better care of myself and better care of my thinking. Don't think like that. Don't allow yourself to be carried away by that kind of thinking. And then, surprisingly enough, that other person, without my doing anything, come to me and say some kind words. And so I recognize have a lot to do with my perception. I think that it's possible with the practice to transform depression. At least episodic depression, it can help. The practice can transform it. Like manic depression is maybe more difficult. But I have heard people who have managed to transform. It takes real determination. You have to be really determined, really strong in your determination. And to be able to practice mindful breathing and finding the root of the depression in your body and your mind. And not giving certain kinds of food by the sense contact, by your eyes and your ears. That is possible to do. And putting yourself in an environment where people are living in a very positive way. So in this way, the understanding the four foods can be very helpful. being involved in any kind of conflict is also a kind of food. The conversations that we listen to sometimes, they can be very nourishing. We can say a few words to someone that can really make them happy for the rest of the day. And we can also listen to people who make us feel tired and weary of life. So we recognize that listening to conversation, engaging in conversation, is something that is a real food for us. We need to understand that food. So we have the right to practice noble silence sometimes in order to be able to take care of the food that comes from conversation. But we also have been taught by Thai to do the practice of Avalokiteshvara, to do the practice of deep listening, compassionate listening. And one way we can practice this is on the telephone. Another way we can practice is by writing letters. And another way we can practice this by in beginning anew sessions. It's wonderful to be able to practice beginning anew bilaterally. That is when both parties are practicing. Of course, we begin unilaterally by looking deeply into ourselves and into the other person. But we know the other person is also doing that, looking deeply into themselves and looking deeply into you. So when we come together, we can share our perceptions and learn from each other. And the great benefit of bilateral beginning anew is that both parties grow. If you do unilateral beginning anew, you may have more chance to grow, but the other person may have less chance to grow. And then there's a kind of beginning anew that is called diffusing the bomb, beginning anew. And that is when someone is suffering deeply and feels that you or others have wronged them deeply, and they don't know how to handle their suffering. And when they speak, there may be a great deal of anger, and there are also wrong perceptions in that. So, but when we feel that we have the strength and the ability and the compassion to be able to listen to that person and give them a chance to say what they need to say about the injustice that they feel has been done to them, then the other person can be relieved of their suffering. we can look at each other. In the beginning, we practice to look at the other person when they're not there with us. In our meditation, to visualize the other person's body. And so we ask ourselves, when we visualize that person, the way they sit, the way they stand, the look on their face, and then we understand a little bit from their body, from their visible form, how they are happy and how they suffer. Because the way we walk or the way we sit, it shows quite a bit about our mind. So first of all, we can meditate on the first skandha, and then after that, we meditate on the second skandha. What kind of feelings does that person have? Are they pleasant feelings? Or are they unpleasant feelings? Do they have many pleasant feelings? Or do they have many unpleasant feelings? And so we can look deeply into the feelings of the other person, which, as I said, you can partly see from their body, but you need to go deeper into that. And then there is the next skandha, it's the perception. We need to look into what kind of, the way that other person sees the world, the way the other person sees us. So maybe sometime with my sisters, sometimes they call me Shu Mẹ, but sometimes I feel I get mixed up with Mẹ. What that means is they call me Reverend Mother something, I don't know, Shu Mẹ, Mother Teacher. Sometimes I think it a little bit get mixed up with Mother, without the Shu, without the Reverend bit. They have a really hard time with Mother in the past. And then sometimes I feel maybe I get a little bit mixed up with a Mother. So sometimes somebody, the other person, sees in us someone else that they had a difficulty with, and therefore we become a difficulty for them. That can happen. Of course, I can do it to someone else. And one time Thai said to me quite strongly, "Do I need to wear a badge saying I'm not your father?" I was quite a difficult disciple, huh? Anyway. So this is something I can do and something other people can do to me. But so looking into the perception of the other person about me, I may see something like that. And actually, when I recognize that someone had a really hard time with their mother, I can give them a bit more space because I know a little bit it's coming maybe from them more than it's coming from me, so I feel that understanding helped me to give a little bit more space. So I look into the perception, I look into the mental formation. I may discover some very beautiful mental formations in the other person. For instance, I like very much the 5 ways of putting an end to anger. When you see someone whose bodily actions are not kind, but you see their words are kind. Or you see someone whose words are not kind, but whose bodily actions are not kind. But whose bodily actions are kind. This is something I've seen very often. Sometimes from somebody's thinking, unkind words, they come out. But then if you think about their bodily actions, how they give massage to a sick sister, or how they knit a hat for other sisters, and then you think, oh, why do I get so caught up in the words? The Buddha nature is always there in this person. So that is the looking at the mental formations. We can find something that is kind. And then the collective consciousness, the fifth skandha, is very important. Because my culture, my particular upbringing is so different from the culture and the upbringing of others. And this is something where we can learn so much. And I think it's important that whenever we want to mediate in a conflict, that we start with that. We start with understanding the background of the other person. Thai said that when you have peace talks, don't start by demanding this and say, demanding that, but start by asking, how are your children? How's your family doing? Start from the human perspective rather than the demand. So when we're listening deeply to somebody in order to understand them, we, in the case of after 9/11 in 2001, in the Dharma talk, I said that what we need is listening deeply sessions. And I thought the same after what happened in May this year, after the killing of George Floyd. We need this deep listening sessions. And Thai said like this: in a deep listening session, you encourage the other person to speak. We may have said or done a number of things that have given you the impression that we discriminate against you. But we don't have the intention to do that. Please tell us so we know what wrong we have done to you. Please tell us what we can do in order to help you live in peace and safety. So it's true that maybe we don't have the intention to discriminate, but the very society in which we live, the way in which we live, it already lays down the foundation for discrimination. We don't want to destroy our environment, but the very way our life is set up, the way we live in our society, we cannot help destroying our environment. And so we need to listen deeply, to learn and to know how we can do better. And in our own time, right view, just like the Buddha said in the deeper sutra, maybe we call it more deep teachings. But of course the teachings Sariputra gave, they lead to the deep teachings. And like the Buddha said, right view is the view of the middle way. It's neither being nor non-being. And we are caught in the view of being and non-being. We are caught in our individualism and in competition. And with all this, there is the one who dominates and the one who is dominated. There's the one who feels threatened. And we ask ourselves, is it possible for us to live in a kind of society where no one is dominating and no one feels threatened? So just like I share with my monastic brothers and sisters, the other day we watched a video clip when the brothers and sisters were preparing for a workshop in which refugees from Syria or maybe the Middle East were looking at maybe the people, the country they had come to, and they just sat in pairs and looked at each other. And in that kind of looking, when we just have the eye contact, we look at the other, there is no one who is dominating. There is no one who feels threatened. And so there is a kind of communication in which each human being has a deeper understanding of the interbeing between myself and between the other. It is true that the person we're looking at we are painting that person, and the person who is looking at us is painting us. But we understand that we are painting each other, and then there's a wonderful interbeing in that. So if we want to listen deeply, successfully, we need to keep alive that sense of interbeing. And so it might be a good thing from time to time to have a sound of the bell when we're listening to each other, in order that we can just look at each other as well. Of course, when you're listening to the other person, you must look at them, not close your eyes. But sometimes the words are not enough. But that also means something else. That we need to listen not only to what the other person is saying, but also what is left unsaid. The suffering that person cannot express or doesn't know how to express. We feel it, even though the words may be blaming us, or we may think intellectually they're wrong perception. The mind is painting a picture. Okay. The mind is painting a picture of sunshine and showers. The mind is painting a picture of days and hours. The mind is painting, the mind is enjoying. The mind is painting a picture of living and dying. The mind is painting a picture of laughing and crying. The mind is painting, the mind is enjoying. And all is here in this moment, a fleeting lifetime, encapsulating thousands and thousands of ages. We touch the earth, we reach the sky. Thank you.